There's a point where the harder you train, the worse your performance gets. If you've been there pushing through sessions, not feeling motivated to train, but feel like you have to train because that's what's going to move you forward, and you just feel like you're drudging through these workouts, and I've been there, and when it finally came down to actually making progress, it was doing what I didn't want to do, which was taking training away. Welcome to the J3U University podcast. I'm your host, John Jewett.
And I'm your co-host, Luke Miller.
Our mission is to elevate the physique coaching standard
and to bring the highest level of competitor to the stage.
Let's jump into today's episode. Deloading. That's the topic of today, Luke. And when things that we really don't want to do, right? I honestly hate deloading. I think most of my clients that I bring up also are like, do I have to deload? And at least that's how I feel a lot of times too. And it's usually not until like I've gone on a vacation where like I'm traveling, I actually had forced to take some days off because of these things. And then I get back home finally like, oh, the sessions are like really good now. Like what happened? It's like, oh yeah, you actually needed some downtime. But that's what we wanted to cover for everyone today is just going through when you should be deloading, when you should not be deloading, and the pros and cons around these things.
Yeah. And I think because a lot of us like originally get into bodybuilding because we love training, like deloads have like one or two things, or like faux pas, or you like hate them and you don't want to do them, or like when you do them, like the only way for you to do them is like to take a whole week off, right? And like that's kind of like the two dynamics you'll get a lot of. And because if you've got that psychological or emotional attachment to training, it's hard to step into the gym and like do sessions that are like 2 reps in reserve or anything like that, right? Like you want to go in, you want to train hard. So the way that you run the deload week or the deload for that athlete or for different athletes can change a little bit. But I think really kind of the biggest thing is recognizing it. I think that's like part one of the deload dynamic is recognizing it for the athlete, understanding what those athletes' telltale signs are. And I think it's pretty different person to person, but I also think it's showing up earlier than you guys probably realize it, because a lot of people wait for the training performance to start to slide. And I would probably argue in a lot of cases that's too late, or you're picking it up too late in a lot of those cases or situations.
I think the training piece is probably sliding from either the motivation to train has dwindled to where you just don't have the oomph to put into your set, or you're actually having some type of like localized neuromuscular fatigue or connective tissue problems to where your ability to stabilize the joints compromised and force output goes down because of that. And so that's where I see kind of the dynamic being, at least for myself too. And I know there's been some talk around, neuromuscular fatigue is more localized, and that just because you have CNS fatigue, some people are saying that doesn't influence the actual neuromuscular contractions, and it just purely just dwindles down on motivation, and you just have to like mentally get there to actually train. But I think they coincide, just coincidentally, like you're going to have like a lot of localized issues occurring and at the same time overlapping of CNS fatigue and having just a lower motivation to put the effort in to train. As much as hardcore as you are, it's very different to feel like you have to like take yourself there when you're blaring metal and you take all the caffeine and just still feel just like an empty skeleton, and nothing's like, giving you the same type of emotional charge there. But some people just can't take it there when they feel like that. I mean, we can, no problem, of course. But to all other you mere mortals, you can't take it there anyway.
For you guys. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's funny. Like, being a coach now, like I train in a lot of different settings where it's like I'm training with a client, or I'm training with Colton, or I'm training by myself. And it's funny how you kind of see different settings lead to a certain quality of sessions. But honestly, like some of the best sessions I've ever had were ones that, you only have to use the headphones, or you only choose to use the headphones for 1 or 2 sets in the whole session, but you're kind of like not driving that stimulation because you still feel fresh enough for training that you don't feel like you have to force it. And that's kind of the goal that I like to try to give for clients. And a lot of this starts for me with like the subjective metric tracking. Like if you look at the J3U coaching app and kind of what we use within clients and like even my sheets or whatever, like there's sections that you can watch. And if you watch your clients closely, you watch that trend just like slowly creep down over time where like it starts to become like a red flag that you need to probably pull back. And like ones that I'll see happen a lot, and you correct me if you think differently or you see different ones, is before you even see the strength start to go is like sleep disruption and digestion disruption are two that I see kind of like get skewed like straight a little bit earlier than like the performance in the gym setting.
Yeah, like you said, I think performance is definitely the later one. I see a lot of just what's your general motivation to train?
Yeah.
And I think just that drive is lessened. Then also, if you had to rate your daily energy level, that starts to come down too. So you just people feel a bit more suppressed as a whole. I think those are some of the early signs, which chicken or egg scenario, like is it that or is it the poor sleep and that makes you feel, less energy, but it's probably kind of a mix of both that do occur. So I think those things kind of coincide. You might have someone starting to get poor sleep, then also they're not as rested when they wake up, and also lower energy and lower motivation throughout the day. So these are kind of like, I think your earlier signs that you could be running into. Then if you look at some of the more of the objective things, like I do like resting heart rate. You do need to like realize that it's only one metric because it can get influenced pretty easily by other things. But I will see that to start skew up pretty quickly when there's fatigue occurring. But it also can drop back down pretty quick too, which also gives you insight of like how quickly you can resolve things. But yeah, I think some of those earlier just subjective metrics are plenty to go off of. I know a lot of times we're trying to make the subjective metrics into more objective metrics with like our Aura rings or what do you have? You have a Whoop, right?
I don't use the Whoop anymore. I kind of started getting away from it because I kept running into days where it was the same thing as like an Aura ring, where I think the Aura ring does it a little bit more frequently than the Whoop, and the Whoop's interesting because it's getting more accurate over time. But they've added a lab work section of it too, which is really cool. But I stopped using it because I kept running into days where it told me like recovery capacity was like 65% and I would feel fantastic and I'd have some of my best sessions and stuff like that. So I've actually stopped wearing it. I'm all for trackables if you have the objectivity to understand that there are errors in the system and that you don't live by it, if that's kind of where it's at, if someone likes them. But I'm still kind of on the fence about them.
Yeah, I think people are weighing too heavily into them, and you see like it's like with anything, like you need to trust your gut and just what is your body telling you immediately, and go off that. Like you don't need to plug it all in a Chat GPT and have it spit out some like answer that has some confirmation bias around what you're feeling and what you should be doing. Like and just go train. Like you see how it goes. It's okay. It's one day. So it is like goes like crap and it's confirmed. Like, all right, then I will go ahead and do something about it. But I've had days like that where you wake up and you feel kind of groggy, like you're not all there. It's like, is this the sign that I should be pulling back and deloading? And I'm like, but man, training I love it. Like it's the part of the day that makes me feel good. Like I think that's the struggle too. Is because you're also not feeling as great because fatigue's maybe there, but training is the therapy for a lot of us. So you go to have that kind of like relief, and you're like, you have to pull back the thing that you like doing. It's like, gosh, there's an emotional piece to it that is a struggle. So, and then I go have a great session, and it's like, well, man, should have just gone with my gut and just like test the waters and see where I'm at. So, yeah, I'm not huge on still like at some point, maybe the wearables will be great indicators for, acute aspects on your preparedness to train. But again, it's not the full thing. We know you can be pretty in the hole and keep having productive training. Like I'll think about when I'm on the tail end of prep and like I'm still going to the gym and like having progressive sessions. It's like, and I'm so suboptimal to do so. And so like in the off season, like I should easily be able to accomplish this, but
man, I've had some like, yeah, I've got a quick story just as like an indicator of how much you can push this off if you're steadfast enough. So in 2022, when I went to the UK and we did the events in the UK, Manchester was the first one. We trained at FLF. So it's like a 9-hour flight to London, and it was an overnight flight to land in the morning of the UK. And then I had to take a train from London to Manchester because my flight didn't go into Manchester. And like Southern boy who's used public transportation like at once in his entire life at that point, right, is looking around at this train station is like, I don't know where to go. It took me like 3 hours to get to Manchester after landing in London. And so I managed to get there. It's like middle of the day. I haven't eaten. I've consumed like 500 mLs of fluids. And they're like, yeah, we're going to train legs this afternoon. So they cooked me up like a breakfast meal. And then we walked to the gym. And I like still beat the logbook with a safety bar squat at the time that I was doing. And it's like literally probably one of the most unideal situations. But I just like willed my way through that session. And it's like it was the worst like pre-setup of like being able to actually perform. But like if you love training enough, like you can will things to happen to a certain extent. Now, were those reps like 100% accurate? And probably not. Like there's probably some like a little bit of momentum out of the bottom. And like that's my point, right? Like if you, where there's a will, there's a way. You find a way to make it happen. But man, it can add up and still not translate in the gym setting if you love it enough.
Yeah, I think here's the point of what we're saying and what we're not saying. Is what we're saying, if like you can be so fatigued and the mental drive of what you need to take it there is harder to get there. But what we're not saying is that you just start compromising your lifts to take it there.
Yep.
And so that should be like the red flag of how you differentiate these things is you'll know if like, hey, I'm starting to have to swing this a little bit more, or I'm shorting the range a bit more. That's when you're saying, all right, I'm not just like needing to have a high training effort. I'm just changing the lift to accomplish matching the logbook. And if those are things you are keep doing, then that is likely the time that you need to pull back and actually have some fatigue like wash off to get back to a state where, you know, you're able to uphold the true performance. Not just, have a false sense of logbook improvement. I think the other one around that too is, at least the one that I run into more, is connective tissue problems, which as you get more advanced, I feel like at least, or advanced or older, I don't know which one it is. Hopefully with age comes advancement, but not for many. But you get stronger, and so you're easier to break when you're strong, and start feeling like more beat up with connective tissue, or like, like right now my right rotator cuff is just not happy, and I can feel the lack of stability and like some like pressing, and even in my like my overhead pull work, and that's starting to get compromised where like it's not stable, like its size getting weaker. And it's like there's certain ways where you could keep training and adjust some lifts and rehab this area, but there's also a point where if it's so compromised that like all your upper sessions like are having to get adjusted, then likely like you're too far to where you should have probably deloaded a while back to actually give yourself the break. And because just connective tissue, tendons, they don't adapt as fast as skeletal muscle does. And so you quickly could beat up those tissues and strength rising to a point where their load tolerance is just not keeping up. So that is the case where you probably need to backpedal. But at least like for myself now, I have like found ways where like, hey, I make some easy adjustments and keep training, but I have to like put work in to resolve this issue. And if it's not resolving, then it's time for me to like go ahead and pull back for, which probably, I think that might be the week-long deload if you're talking connective tissue problems. More, and I guess that's the thing is like you could deload in just one area relatively, then systemically, if like systemically you feel good, you might just be a big training adjustment, but it has to be a bigger training adjustment to where you can actually resolve that area, that problem area. Thanks everyone for tuning in to today's podcast. Are you struggling to hit your peak on show day? Feeling lost in the offseason? Upgrade your coaching game with J3U University. Our program covers everything from offseason to contest prep to peak week, all based from real client results. Along with our comprehensive physique curriculum, you'll also get access to our 4 rooms with our J3U team to answer any questions you have and live Q&A sessions to further your coaching and athlete experience. We are the source of education for top IFBB pros and coaches. Join us to elevate the coaching standard at J3U University. Let's get back to today's podcast.
I think this brings up an interesting question because deloading does not look the same client to client. Like there's not one mold of how to deload. But if you had to give recommendations, like where do you start or how do you differentiate it? Do you do it different for off-season, the contest prep? Like what goal are you trying to accomplish? And then how does that guide kind of the decision of how you go about deloading?
Yeah, I think that's the great start point is starting from the outcome of what you want with your deload and then reverse engineering that backwards. Because I think people ask it the other way, like, all right, what should I do for my deload? It's like, well, what's your problem you're trying to resolve?
Yeah.
And what the point of the deload is just being able to get back to a place of productive hypertrophy training. And so if that's the goal, we then look at like what's keeping you from that goal. It's like, well, I got a bum knee, a bum elbow, and a bum shoulder. It's like, okay. Well, how long does it take to resolve these issues? That's probably how long your deload is going to need to be. For some people, you might have to be like, hey, this might be 2 weeks for you to resolve these problems. For someone else, it's like, man, no motivation to train. Like I'm starting to alter my lifts just to make the thing happen. It could just be like, hey, 3 nights, 3 days off of training completely, off the gym. And finally, by the 3rd day, you're itching to get back and can't wait to train. And then you can go have a great session. So the first thing is like, what is the problem that's keeping you from optimal hypertrophy training? And then that's where you start to get back to the place to be productive again.
Yep, 100%. And I think that's kind of like the greatest way to think about it because you tend to find and this is just like average trends. So like if we kind of talk in like a little bit broader language, like contest prep, when you try to reverse engineer, like the whole goal is to drop enough fatigue to allow that person to continue down the path of the deficit and being ready in show stage or the time they have to get on stage or ahead of time so that you can do your peak testing. And so like the deloads in that realm, like you're trying to catch them earlier and you're doing them in much shorter time durations because you're trying not to pull them out of the things that drive the deficit, where in the off season, you have so many things helping you with recovery capacity. Like sometimes it does kind of push you a little bit further along, where in order to pay that debt back, sometimes it is a little bit longer. And so that's kind of like the broad strokes way that I look at it, but reverse engineering is always going to be kind of the best way to ask the initial question.
Then even in the prep scenario, it's like, and why it even goes to the point of in prep, you should be running like a lower volume, tapering your volume down within a reasonable recovery capacity, because you won't have to crop up with so many problems or like you would in off season when you're really pushing the boundaries of volume as a whole. So it just paints that picture, I think, a little bit clearer. But from a what to do perspective, say like, hey, some people have said, can I just take a week off? It's like you could just complete rest. It'll drop off fatigue. As far as connective tissue goes, the best thing you can do to resolve those issues is through training. And also having some training there. I think there's a positive psychological component to it too, but I think that is one of the big benefits to like having a fast recovery time was keeping some type of stimulus there. And so what I would say is like, at least it gets back to what is your problem? You know, what for you in your training, what drives the most fatigue? And if you're following an approach where you're like, hey, I go to failure, I do partials, and that's probably the part where you need to pull back. So it's like, all right, I should probably go to keep a few reps in the tank, and even maybe taking like one set drop off. So just a big volume drop, which these are the most fatiguing things in training, your total volume and your proximity to failure. So making some reductions there would be a good start point. If it's more connective tissue issue problems, then load is the issue. And it could be a mix of both, like where, you know, you're having connective tissue problems with, you could do a 50% load reduction, slow eccentrics, still staying far away from failure. Like that could help bring back some like good positive like collagen remodeling for those connective tissue, and then improving load tolerance, and then get you back to a spot where you can have productive loading. Then other areas where you don't have problems, you can probably keep loading relatively the same, but that's just where you still pull back volume and keep a few reps in the tank. So if I don't know if there's like a maybe that just is not enough of a framework for people to work within. Like, hey, I need the hard numbers, but in general, like probably doing, you can maintain on really low amounts. So even if like, hey, you want to half your volume and keep like 3-4 reps in the tank, like that's going to be completely acceptable for your deload. And you just do that until you feel like you're back to the place where, hey, I'm waking up feeling fresh and energetic and I'm itching to train, then go train.
Yeah, one of the things, if you do go the route of like days off, like you, instead of like the volume reduction and continuing training, if you go the route of like, let's say 5-6 days off, the reintroduction of training on the back end, you need to have some level of reps in reserve, because I've seen people like ruin a week of training almost because they're so sore, like reintroducing the training stimulus, because they're almost like detrained, right?
Yeah.
It just like it that now that soreness from that first 1 to 2 sessions carries over into the following session, and then it just accumulates really fast. So the reintroduction is pretty important as well if you do go the other side of the spectrum where you just pull someone out.
Yeah, if your volume tolerance has dropped down so much, you quickly throw someone back into the war trenches to where by the end of the week you feel just like how you were before. So it's yeah, I think continue to train would be smart, or like you're saying, having kind of a volume reintroduction the first week and then tapering that back up. And I know people think like, man, I'm so sore, like now my training's really productive. It's like, no, you're just haven't had the adaptations of like the repeated bout effect kind of wore off. So soreness doesn't mean. Some people ask me, like, if I'm sore, does that mean I'm overtrained? Does that mean I got a good stimulus? It's like, no, it doesn't mean either one. Like, soreness can be kind of irrelevant to a degree, because you can train when you're sore and it still doesn't mean you're overtrained, or you're not ready to train. But, but either way, taking a whole week off, I think it has more negatives to it than actually being able to still train to some degree.
Especially if you consider the psychological for some, for sure.
It just should feel like an easy week of training, like going in, I don't want to say just getting a pump, but kind of, you should walk out of the gym and feel like, man, that was an easy workout, and it should be. We're just used to like leaving the gym feeling like we've been completely wiped, and that is defeating the point of your deload workout. How for you, like what are the red flags if you're doing this after so many weeks? Is there, you shouldn't be doing it too soon or too late?
Yeah, so like my sweet spot for people, I love it when the deload kind of falls around the 10 week mark to the 12 week mark, because like I think about this as a little bit more phasic an approach, where I can get through an off-season phase with one deload, which means if I have let's say a 22 week off-season, means I've had like 21 weeks of really productive training. Because a lot of times with a lot of my athletes, I try to like preemptively deload heading into a push phase for an all season. So like that pre-prep transition, that like all season transition, whether it's a mini cut or whatever it is for that person, even if it's post show coming out of a stage where you're like doing that post show phase before the all season, I usually always try, if it lines up well, to deload like in close proximity to the start of that push. So like the push being where compounds start to escalate up, because then I get a maximum amount of time of like productive training within that. So that's why I kind of like that 10 to 12 week dynamic. And I tend to find like it still allows for volume to be at like a maximally adaptive state where it's not like 17 weeks between deloads where you could probably just be training with more volume, but it's also not like 4 to 5 weeks where you're training with so much volume that you're deloading so soon that you barely get momentum on the training side.
Do you think that statement is getting overblown by people, like trying to chase the max volume that they can recover from to run into the deload on purpose, that it could just be okay to run it for the 17 weeks or 18 weeks of just a volume you can recover from, and that, hey, like you end up to the same spot? That is what some people make the argument for, right? Like you have a little bit more volume, but then you got to take this week back to pull back and then kind of ramp back up a little bit, versus you just kept training, maybe a little less volume, but you kept recovering from it and not run into a wall.
Yeah, you could make the argument of it, like where you had, like if you had the comparison of two people that ran this, I would imagine the progress would be fairly similar given all other things equal. I just really, the place that I see it kind of help is like specialized processes, so like the more advanced athlete, and maybe I'm a little skewed because I'm working with like a lot of higher level athletes now where, man, it's just like really hard to make some body parts that are tougher to progress move if we're not pushing the ceilings of volume locally for those body parts.
Which those individual body. So are you running more into connective tissue stuff for those individual body parts, or is it still systemic?
Yeah, so the deloads are usually connective tissue based rather than systemic. And so like it's shorter deloads. So that's when I say the 10 to 12 week dynamic. Like my deload dynamic, if I'm running the ideal process, like the ones that I like to run, when I pull back on someone, it's not ever a week of pulling back. It's usually in that 4 to 5 day realm, and it's max.
So the mid push deload is like the oil change. Yeah. Versus wait till you nearly burn up the motor, then we're doing a whole motor replacement.
Exactly. Yeah. So like I try to keep people in that like really productive spot. I just don't find much value in burning up the motor, like if you want to use that terminology, because like you pay it on the back end too. Like it's not just the deload, right? Like you have to pay it the first week of introduction as well. So I just feel like you're wasting time, in my opinion. So I'd rather catch it early, do a quick oil change, and then keep them going than rip back for 2 weeks.
Yeah, a lot of people see the deload as wasting time, right? Because there was a paper that had come out. We reviewed it actually on an earlier podcast, and a lot of people were like, deloads are pointless or something. It was the headline. I think it was like around a 9-week study, and they deloaded in the middle versus not deloading in the middle, and the non-deload group, I think they had greater strength improvements. I think hypertrophy was about the same though. So there wasn't like an improved outcome of hypertrophy, but the strength gains were diminished. So there not necessarily was a waste of time, but right, that's only 9 weeks. What about 18 weeks? Like we train longer than that. It's like that easily could have run someone in the ground. So you can't just take that paper and run with it, that deloads are pointless, because they're not. And if you're only looking at hypertrophy outcomes as well versus, injuries and sustainability over this long term, especially with the higher level athletes where, you're no longer driving your Honda Civic through the offseason, you're driving a drag car. Yeah. That it's not going to make it 20 weeks.
No,
like
it's not.
You can redline your Honda Civic all you want, things not going to break down, but your drag car is going to blow up. So it's a little different type of maintenance schedule that needs to happen for like as you get stronger and bigger and more advanced.
That's such a good point, because the deload dynamic for earlier athletes is so much different.
Yeah, man, when we started out training, like, you didn't deload, didn't even know what that was. You just keep on going because you're young and indestructible. But yeah, you can just keep going. Like you're not even strong enough yet to like really necessarily get hurt and movement discrepancies and things. Like some people do, don't get me wrong, but for that kind of like comes as you continue to advance more so.
100%. Well, is there anything else you would leave with that, or is it kind of where you would wrap it up?
Maybe the last thing around this is, do you do anything else with the output side of like around? Because people ask about cardio or steps during this, or even the nutrition or drug side, and those could be like very big points, but they're touch points I think to bring up how you handle it.
Yeah, a general rule of thumb is like if I'm deloading training, I'm also deloading activity. Like the whole goal is to drop fatigue, right? So cardio drops or steps get reduced or whatever that dynamic of that athlete is. Especially in contest prep, because the whole goal of deloading is like rinse fatigue, get them back to being productive. So I pretty much like do a reduction in all activity metrics. So like if it's an athlete that has steps, cardiovascular activity and training, like training, cardiovascular activity will drop, steps will have a slight reduction. I let them have those 2 days or 3 days, whatever it is for that athlete of rest, and then we kind of crack on with the deficit again. All season we'll see activity reductions as well. I'm not a big fan of adjusting food. Like I know I get this question a lot. It's like, should I have more food or less food because I'm deloading? It's like neither. You should just maintain the plan that you're on in most scenarios. Like if you're running the training day, rest day plan, like I usually just have them do the rest day plan. I think trying to reduce food because of reduced activity defeats the point of recovering. And then like you're not trying to take away time from a surplus in an off season where you would add more food in. Prep can have some special cases where food might change, but most of the time that's that dynamic staying the same. And then I'm not really changing PEDs either.
Yeah, you were usually not, at least for us, we're not running aggressive like days of a surplus or a deficit. Like if you had a large like caloric rotation days, if you're running something like that, you might see like a large drop off if you're like, all right, don't do your high carb days because you're going to be training less, and then that could drop someone down to a deficit. Or if you're running some like string of low days, and maybe you have a high day once a week, that could keep someone like pretty dug down. So, but if you have like a moderate deficit and even just a slight off-season surplus, likely the amount of volume that you're coming down from doesn't really necessitate any type of calorie adjustments. So, some people ask about PDs. I mean, obviously, if you're using more moderate, long-acting esters, like just you're going to usually keep training after this deload. So by the time if you lowered them in your deload, that change really isn't being seen to like 3 to 4 weeks after. So it doesn't really make sense to do, unless you want to add in some test suspension and Anavar like during your deload to really heal up well. Someone's just gonna steal this clip and be like, "That's what to do during your deload." Don't do that. That was a joke. So yeah, no, there's no PD changes that really need to happen. Now, if you do have the extra free days, though, we call them free days, would be time to like, hey, if you have like some type of sports chiro that you go to that does some type of tissue work, like maybe have that put in for an extra day since you have this gap where you're not training and you have to leave the house because you're this online coach and bodybuilder and just need to, escape. Do something like that. Like that could, if it's a massage, we would call it a neutral probably benefit, but if you have someone that's actually doing something greater with tissue, then it could be a positive. Or people got a real kick of like cold plunge for a while. I don't know where that went. But anyway, if you're going to do it, that would be the week to do it when you're not, trying to like create a lot of adaptive changes with hypertrophy. So anyway, yeah, I think that wraps up those things. If you want the full framework, guys, for managing fatigue, volume, progression, how we work through all for hypertrophy, for bodybuilding, we teach all this inside J3 University. So check out our level 1 course, and thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next week.